And now, Deborah Kobylt live.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. We have a wonderful guest, Mary Albertoli. You are the founder of The Shift, which is a digital platform allowing young adults and teens to speak out about mental health without any stigma. So, Mary, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Deborah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about The Shift. And I know that this is your brainchild. Why did you decide to start it?
Well, you say it's my brainchild. I have an amazing team behind me, too, that has just allowed this to come into full fruition. But I would say about maybe a few years back, I had heard about a 9-year-old that had hung herself because she was bullied. And I became devastated at the thought that we're allowing this to happen, that we aren't interrupting this conversation that are happening with our young, and even especially our young adults now, who are seeing a lot of homicidal and suicidal behaviors. So I got into communication with a lot of producers that I met, very luckily, to help create The Shift, which is definitely, we've had shift start conversations throughout the summer where young adults would come together with our youth ambassador, Adrian Finch, who is actually going to be our co-host in our 2 wellness rallies coming up, where we're bringing together really impact with national and local nonprofit organizations, schools, university, policymakers, mental health experts, and lived experience influencers to launch a series of unique, immersive, interactive, youth-oriented virtual wellness rallies. Our first one is May 1st. It's with NAMI Westside, which is our partner in LA, to kick off their NAMI Westside LA annual wellness weekend, May 1st at 11 a.m. And the second one is going to be taking place in Chicago with Rincon Family Services and other prominent nonprofits to host this event. And that's May 15th at 1 p.m. Central Time.
But let's talk about what is The Shift, right? I mean, people hear it and they're like, well, what is it? Is it a place where I go show up? Let's talk about that so young people know it's a place that they can look up, right? It is, I believe, a collection of 10 young filmmakers, right, who went out there and they were talking about either their own experiences or other people's experiences. Can you explain that to us?
Well, we did. Sure. We did an initial promo back in November of 2018, where we had young adults ages anywhere from 14 up to 24. And they spoke openly and honestly about their daily struggles. And some of them were extreme, anywhere from anxiety to suicidal ideation on a daily basis. And these were kids that just opened up and shared. And of course, we took responsibility for what they were sharing, got them the help they needed. And they're doing great now, thank God. But there's so many other young adults and teens and kids who want to open up about what they're going through and are afraid to, because they think that maybe their issue is not serious enough to talk about, or they're afraid because of judgment that they have of themselves, or what it means to really suffer with a mental health condition or a situation that actually has triggered that.
Right. Now, is this a place where people go, or is this something that they view? Like, explain that to people who hear about it. They're like, well, where is it? How do I find about it?
So the Shift website is www.shifttheshow.com. On there, we have our promo. We have information about the events coming up. We actually have our Shift Starter conversations where other young adults and kids can go look and see the interactions that took place and how many young adults spoke openly about their breakdowns and breakthroughs through their journey and how they got help and resources to utilize. So it's really a fantastic way to get in touch with resources. We're really promoting the idea that young adults especially can be self-advocates for their own mental health journey. Because we realize too that there seems to be not a lot of resources out there. So we want to bring these resources together with these young adults so they have the help they need.
What are some of the resources? Now, when someone goes to and they look what you're doing, they look online, they're like, this is interesting. What are some of the resources that you can connect young people with?
Sure. I mean, certainly, if they're in crisis, they want to text the crisis text line at 741-741. They could just write hello, and a crisis hotline worker should come back and get back to them. Um, there's many different places that they can go to. Certainly, we're talking about a trusted adult initially, like when you're afraid and you don't have someone you can go to of your own age group. Is there a trusted adult you can talk to? If not, someone that you know will get you the help you need, someone who will take it to that further step to connect you either with a resource or call 911, where you're hearing things like so many times we neglect the signs. I mean, where young adults are talking about, either wanting to take their life or they're angry or they're going through something, and we're not looking at the signs where we can call 911 and have them simply address what they're going through so that we could stop some of these catastrophes that are happening.
You mentioned, because we spoke earlier before our show, that mental health issues are really on the rise in this country in particular. What's going on, Mary, that this is happening? Or are young people just more vocal about it and they feel more comfortable talking about it? What do you think? A little of both?
Well, it could be a little of both. Certainly the conversation has gotten to a point now where it feels like it's a bit more normalized to talk about things like anxiety and depression. And I also think that there's many different factors. There's a social media whether or not it's used effectively or not is a big contingent. Certainly there's a pandemic going on where, kids are afraid of missing out on things, or they're stuck, in isolation, or don't know who to talk to when they're feeling an exacerbated emotional response to something that is pretty normal, but they just need to know they're okay. They need to check in. So I don't know, that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I have three young men as children, and, I'm always thinking about that. We bring up the conversation in our own house, but I think there's an awful lot of stress at school. Clearly bullying, that's always been there, but it's now you've got cyberbullying. There's stress about college, kids who want to go to college. You've got to have the perfect grade and the perfect this, and then it's just so much. And I'm wondering, what can we do so kids feel more empowered from within, which I know is difficult because you've got hormones raging and people aren't thinking straight. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are mental health counselors telling kids when they finally go for help?
Well, it depends on the mental health worker, but certainly they'll do like a psychosocial analysis and see what situation they're living in at home too. It's a communication thing with parents where sometimes kids don't want to talk because they feel like what they're saying is not landing in a way that they can get the help they need. But there are a lot of things going on right now. I think that maybe times kids are exposed to things that are way too advanced for them, emotionally and physiologically, which is an issue. All those things we're going to get information from during their surveys. The whole point is to collect information so we can provide the help. And the best way is to honestly find out for our young adults in these two communities right now. And we're going to be, of course, spreading throughout the country. That's our goal.
Right.
To really let us know what they need.
Who are you partnering with, to send people to different areas to go and get help?
Sure. Well, certainly in Los Angeles, it's NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Health. We're working very closely with, their Ending the Silence program, which is about suicide. And also they have listening sessions I'll be providing on the Wellness Rally. We're also working with Rincon Family Services in Chicago, and also Youth Alliance. There's many different organizations that we're actually, and I can give you a list of them if you'd like, but
just a few of them that
Rincon
you
definitely in Chicago, and then NAMI are the two big ones that we're partnering up with those two. And there will be umbrella organizations with them as well.
You were talking again earlier before our podcast about isolation. You also talked about COVID, how a lot of kids have felt isolated and left out. What are the signs, right? Like if we notice a kid just seems depressed or whatever, what are some of the signs that we should look out for if we see that a kid might be struggling?
Well, any kind of behavioral changes in sleep or eating, where they're withdrawing from even eating or even talking to people is of concern. You can't force someone to talk, but certainly you could be monitoring what they're doing. There's also the language. I mean, if there's things coming out of someone's mouth that doesn't make sense and it appears like they're angry, pay attention, because, unfortunately, they have access to, to things that could hurt them and others. So we really want to pay attention to the language that's being used, and how kids are saying how they're coping. But really to have these mental health check-ins, if you can, with your kids every day, just to say, listen, I'm just checking in. I want to find out how things are going for you. If there's anything that you're dealing with that you want to run by me, please let me. And really not to come from a place of stigma. Like if your child brings up that makes you feel uncomfortable, go talk to someone yourself so that you can come better prepared to hear what they're saying.
Look, there's no stigma. I mean, we break our leg. We have, physical health issues. I'm glad that I think we're at a point now in society that we're recognizing that everyone has some level of mental health issue, regardless of what it is. There's anxiety, there's depression. And I do think that the stigma is starting to lower. Do you think so?
Well, I'm really hoping that people are becoming less judgmental of themselves and others for going through something emotional, especially at this point in time, because we all are. There's just way too much going on for us not to have reactions to them. And reactions are healthy. It's what we do with them, of course. But I do think that more and more organizations are getting on top of what's going on around the mental health conversation and really promoting. Like I think the cults have something out about stopping the stigma. And there's a few other organizations that I see actually with stars talking about how they cope with anxiety and to continue to work through it, that it's not the end of the road.
It's true. Very often when you have celebs talking about something, right? People take note, right? Like recently with Demi Lovato, right? They've all been talking about that. She was at the Grammys and she showed up and she was present and people were so happy to see that she's pulling through. So I do think that's very important when they see that. It's like, hey, if it can happen to them, it can happen to me too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's silly to think that no matter what circumstance we find ourselves in, that we wouldn't have emotional things we have to process and talk about in our lives.
Now, the shift, again, you've got how many kids worked on the shift and how many different little interview sessions are there on the shift? When we go to look for some of the kids making their videos, how many are on there?
Well, we're still getting submissions right now for the wellness rallies. Once those submissions are in, we're going to basically, that's when the creative team goes to work and creates the virtual wellness rally with all the pre-recorded content and even live content that may come in via video recordings. So, yeah.
But I mean, you've got different scenarios with kids, their videos on there, right? That other people can go and view and say, that sounds familiar. I've been through that. Like I'm trying to explain to people what it is that they can find in terms of videos that are out there. Yeah.
So on the shift starter conversations, they've talked anywhere from eating disorders to anxiety, depression, cultural biases with stigmas. We've had people talk about suicidal ideation, just, having different relationships with their folks, whether or not some of them were painful than others, but just really talking about a conglomerate of issues. Peer bullying was definitely talked about, especially by our host of the Shift Starters. She talked openly about how she was horribly bullied. And a lot of people kind of came on board and watched the Shift Starters on Instagram and gave us their thoughts. And a lot of people connected to what was being said.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Tell me a little bit about you and your background. I know that you're very well educated and you also were a social worker for some time. So tell me about not just that, but also any struggles that you may or may have not had with depression.
Sure. So I knew way back when that I wanted to be a social worker, even though I did leave the profession after 12 years, because it wasn't just the novice idea of helping people. It was that there was something in language that was not being talked about in a way that could be really empowering. So I wanted to learn what that was about for myself because, I too, I lost a brother when I was 14 and my parents just didn't have the ability to talk about it in a way that I mean, they were struggling themselves. They were suffering. They lost their 10-year-old boy. So I was kind of left, as most of us were in the family, kind of reeling with the sadness and not knowing how to process it. So, it kind of carried with me throughout my life until finally I said, I have to get some help around this. And I went to psychotherapy for a while.
How did that help you? Was it depression that you were struggling from, or, how did it manifest in your life?
Sure. Both depression and anxiety. There was times in college when I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. I was just in too much pain emotionally. And it was way back when there was not Prozac available. So I was really in a situation where I didn't know what else to do but to just be with it. Even talking about it after a while, I didn't have the ability to communicate it that I needed help. I talked to friends about situations in my life that kept on repeating, but it wasn't like I was getting to the bottom of it.
Right. So when you're in your own work as a social worker, who did you deal with and who did you help? Because I imagine that this is what led to the profession that you've been in all these years, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I stopped social work after 12 years. But yes, keeping an eye on what was happening with the youth and these behavioral disorders. I worked in a psychiatric unit of a hospital. It was actually a while I was their chief social worker. I would see kids come in on a consistent basis daily, either talking about suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation in our ER. I would evaluate them to see whether or not they would need to stay at our facility for maybe a week to 2 weeks so we could really understand what was going on and help them and the family try to cope better and create some outpatient treatment they can have as well upon discharge.
Gosh, mental health seems to be behind everything, right? I mean, here in LA, we've got so many issues going on, particularly with the homeless. And we all know that very often they end up in that situation because of, mental illness issues, that they never had help. And then the drugs come in and then all sorts of things come in. And I mean, you can see where it's sort of the underbelly of so many problems.
Sure.
We as a society have to deal with this.
Oh, yeah.
What do you recommend that we do? Now, I know you've got your corner and you're dealing with young adults, which is teens, which is fantastic. But what can we do as a society moving forward? I mean, just to make sure that mental health is forefront. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. It's kind of insidious. We really need to take it into our work cultures. People talk about work-life balance, but I got to tell you, there's a lot of organizations that don't really support it in a way where they actually say to their employee, you're done for the day, or you're done for the weekend. And at home, I'm hearing stories from friends where they're working much more at home than they were actually in the office. And they have to tell
That's
their boss,
interesting.
Yeah, they're saying to their boss, look, when I get back, I'm not working these hours because it's
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying that we need to get on the same playing field in this conversation, what it means to have work-life balance for kids and for adults. Because
there's no doubt. I mean, look at what's going on today. It's in the news with Goldman Sachs. I'm sure you read about that, where they're scaling back a little. I think these guys and women, of course, are working 100+ hours a week. I mean, come on. And today they said, okay, we'll stop the Saturday work. It's like, oh, thanks. It's shocking to me. And I know so many people who go to, top business schools, and their goal is to go to a place like Goldman Sachs. And I think, man, you're nuts, because that place is a machine. It'll grind you up like a hamburger, and that's the kind of stuff that's got to go, right?
Well, it just seems like, I don't have an answer. All I know is what's effective and not effective. And I'm seeing a lot of people get burnt out from those schedules. And they're not taking the time to look at not only their mental health, but their physical health and their well-being. And you're kind of not seeing people as whole people. You're seeing them as engines. And, I don't understand it myself.
Yeah, no, I understand. You're doing something about the mental health issues of young people. I understand. So talk to me about a little bit about empowering young people to get help, because that's very, very important. And also wanted to get into something else, so I don't want to forget it, language that we use in the world, like, oh, you're crazy and all kinds of stuff. So first, let's talk about empowering young people to get help. What can we do?
So the shift is whole purpose is not only to talk about this conversation and stop the stigma and to ask us the inquiry of what keeps that stigma alive within ourselves. Because when it's there, we have the option to either keep it going or drop it
Right.
for the sake of our neighbor or the sake of our family. So it's certainly that part. And I'm sorry, what was your other question?
Well, just again, empower people to ask out. There's no stigma here. We all got something that we need help with.
Correct.
Some a little more extreme than others, and that's so okay. Some people
Right.
are manage to hold it together, for lack of a better word, a little better, and some struggle more. And there's no stigma. Reach for help, but also, I was asking you about, oh God, now I forgot what I was asking you. Oh well.
I know the rallies will center around the communities that we're focused on. So everybody who attends, especially from that area, will have a lot of resources they can walk away from. So,
like
and
what? Can you
some,
be like, what I'm trying to do is be specific. Like, oh, you'll have this, this, and this, and somebody will go, oh, that's for me. You know
well,
what I
for
mean?
example, Rise Above Disorder is another organization that has partnered with us. Now, what they do is they actually have been giving free services.
Oh.
So, like I can't list all the organizations I could, but that's something that will be provided to people who actually come, a resource list. So they have that
Mm-hmm.
immediately when we start the rally,
Mm-hmm.
and they know that's who they can go to if they're in crisis or if they
Mm-hmm.
need extra resources to talk about things.
Right. What I asked you before, now remembered, was the language. That's a
Yes.
big deal. If you're always calling somebody another name, oh, you're crazy, or oh, you're not, you're whatever. I'd say, when can we get to the point where people realize that's not correct? We were in a time when certain words are not politically correct. Well, maybe this
Right.
isn't mentally correct. Do you know what I mean? Words matter.
Well, they do
Um,
matter. And, our impact is really important. And the more that you don't step up to the plate and use words that honor the other person and what they're going through, then the more you're going to end up hurting yourself. Because I think this affects all of us. Like words like crazy, words like um, too many issues or too many problems or too much can leave people feeling like they can't talk about what they're going through. Um, so it can be really a deterrent.
yeah.
Even culturally, I grew up in an Italian Irish household, and sometimes we were pretty stoic about what we were going through, and it didn't behoove us not to be able to talk about it. It didn't allow the freedom to be able to accept ourselves fully for what we were going through at that point in time.
Yeah. That word crazy, that crazy word is terribly overused. Sometimes people behave crazy because they're not being heard or understood. And then the other side assigns a name to it. And that's one thing that's always irritated me. I've seen it happen 100 times in the workplace and in people's homes as well. So I just think the whole name calling thing is also an issue, and it could lead somebody down a road of depression and feeling awful about themselves. I just think it's great that the conversation is getting wider and wider. Tell us again, if you will, a little bit about these two dates. When are they? They're virtual,
Right.
and how people can join.
Sure. So it's going to be streamed through www.shifttheshow.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is in Los Angeles. Once again, we're partnering up with the National Alliance for Mental Illness. It starts at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And that's, going to kick off their wellness rally for the week, or actually for the weekend. And then the second one is May 15th at 1 p.m. Central Time in Chicago. And once again, it'll be streamed through our website.
Yeah, but I also want people to know it's very important that on your website, you've got young people working with young people, recording their experiences so you can hear it right for them. It's not from them. It's not like an adult recording their experiences. No. It's kid to kid, and kids understand what they're going through. They always look at the adults and say, you don't get it. And honestly, I don't blame them. They feel like, adults just, they're not there. They don't understand the current day pressures. So I want to appeal to people, young people in particular, parents who are watching this, encourage your kids or other people that to go online and take a look at what some other people are sharing, because none of us are alone. And particular, the young people that you serve, which is what the ages primarily are, what, about, you said 14 to 24, is that right?
Yeah, anywhere from like 13, 14 to 24. Yeah.
And you've got resources for people, you've got places for people to go, and you've got suggestions. So I love that you've done this, and that you just sprung into action when you heard about that young person, that 9-year-old. I remember that story. I was sick when I heard that, and I'm sick for the parents too. I mean, I couldn't, they probably didn't see anything coming, and now here we are, right? But hopefully,
and unfortunately, that's not the only story. There's more and more kids of that age that are being impacted, and if they just had a conversation and know that they're not alone, and really can relate to other kids and get the resources they need, I know that talking does a world of good. Even sometimes you have to have the hard conversations to get to the easier ones, but it's a process. But it starts by talking.
It does. Mary Albertoli of The Shift, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. For all you do, is there anything else you want to add, please, that I didn't ask you that you'd like people to know?
I just want to give a shout out to the incredible team of women that I work with. They're all female and they're all on board. Maureen Isern, Kitty Overton, Nadia Sermova, Wadua Wali, just amazing people, Shaggy, Sam, that have taken upon themselves this journey with me and have done an amazing job. They're really creating the backbone of these wellness rallies, and I'm so excited. And also, you're not alone. I mean, I just want people to know how much, when they start thinking that way, really talk to someone, because you're not. We're all in this together.
Yeah, we're not alone. Thank you so much, Mary Albertoli of The Shift. I've really enjoyed talking to you. You're doing really important work.
Deborah.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us for Deborah Kobylt Live. You'll find us everywhere: Facebook, YouTube, IGTV, and then we stream this on all audio podcast platforms. So please look up our show there. And we appreciate you joining us on this really important conversation. And we will all see you next time.